Turn your Bibles to Psalm 19. We're going to get a running start on this week. If you're looking at the outline and figuring we'll be here all day, just relax. We'll take a couple weeks to unpack this psalm. If I would be able to have a sit down with you, maybe one of the questions I would ask you, and I'd be interested, is what good books did you read outside of the Bible? That's a pretty good one. But what good books did you read in 2024? Just think about that. What good books did you read in 2024? Now, some of you don't have to take any time because you didn't do one, but some of you are thinking about, Alan's over there thinking about the 125 books you read, and which one was the best. And then I would ask you, why did you read them? Like, what was it that caused you to maybe go on Amazon, because you're not going to a bookstore much anymore, right? Go to Amazon and order it off of Amazon, or maybe you did walk into a bookstore and looked around, but what is it that motivated you to pick up that book? And some of you would say, well, it was a subject matter. I was very interested in that subject matter, whether it was a theological subject matter or a practical subject matter, maybe professional subject matter, but I was very, very interested in that subject matter. Okay, is that a good enough reason to pick up a book, or is there something else involved there? For some of you, it would be more, well, I like that author, right? So I read everything that maybe Simon Sinek or someone, I read everything they write. And what if the subject matter interested you, but maybe the author didn't? Now, let's be honest, there's some books we look at, the subject matter interests us, so we buy it because the subject matter interested us, and then we start reading it, we go, oh, what a waste this was. But it has a good title, so I'll put it on the shelf. And then there are some that the subject matter doesn't interest you at all because some people maybe not have a creative editor, so it's just like a book on the Psalms would be entitled, cleverly, Psalms. And so that didn't overly get you, but it was so intriguing because the author took apart the scripture and enlightened you as you read it. But there's one thing you probably won't do. You probably won't buy a book if there's not some sort of synchronism between the two. Let me give you an illustration. Building a Godly Home by Ozzy Osbourne. Okay, you might not want to buy that, right? Or Open and Honest Communication by Vladimir Putin. Okay, nope, not going to buy that one. How to Age with Grace by Theo Eikenberry. Now, if you don't know Theo, he's my 2-year-old grandson. All right, so you're probably not going to buy that book. How to Dunk a Basketball by Bill Boulet. Now, I can dunk at about a 4-foot rim. That's about how good I am. Or How to Shoot Under Par by Alan Green. There's a lot of books that you probably, I just always picking on your golf game over there. Now, what we want to do is we're reading or we're listening to people, right? A lot of you are podcast people. You want to listen to someone and you want to read someone that you trust or someone who reflects the culture that you want to listen to. Okay, so sometimes we're always listening with a creative or a critical mindset, right? And that we're making sure it lines up with truth. But we want to make sure that we're not just, some authors was, hey, I'm going to accept everything they say, and some authors, no, I'm going to filter it. I'm going to filter it a lot. But we want to listen to people. We want to listen to what other people are saying. It's simplistic, and we want to read the Bible. I'm going to talk about that next week a lot. We want to read the Bible. That's vital. But we also want to listen to people. God's created people. God's created people with gifts and talents. Here's one person you ought to listen to, the missus. Right? You say, I don't need to listen to people. Oh, yes, you do. Right? You might want to listen to the mister or your kids. We do want to listen to other people. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of times you're looking for advice, and who do you call when you want advice? Who do you call? Now, some people will call someone who's going to give them the advice they really want so they can do what they want to do, right? That aside, who do you call when you want advice? You're going to call someone you trust. And so the question we ask as we go to Psalm 19 is, why should we listen to God? Why should we listen to him? And then next week we'll talk a lot about how do we listen to him. So this brings us to Psalm 19. Now, just to let you know where we're going, we're going to look at the first 6 verses this week. We'll finish it next week. And then we're going to do a series on understanding yourself, understanding your giftedness, how God has gifted you. We'll do that in Ephesians 4 and in 1 Corinthians 12. We'll do that for about a month and a half, and then we're going to go into 1 John. Okay, so that's where we're going in our pulpit ministry in the beginning of 2025. Psalm 19. Now, you see in your outline that God speaks, right? God is speaking all the time. By the way, Satan's speaking, people are speaking, there's all sorts of people preaching, right? They might not call it preaching, but there's all messages out there. And we are the most over-communicated culture up to this date ever. We're constantly being communicated to, right? As a matter of fact, it used to be you had, remember what quiet time? That meant nothing, no noise, no talking, just quiet. Some of you get that when you take a walk in the morning, but some of you wake up to people talking, right? You wake up, you don't have an alarm clock that goes, wah, 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 wah. Most of you don't do that, right? You have something come on. And I wake up. I'm the person, by the way, if I set my alarm at 5:30, I wake up at 5:29. Anyone do that? Like, it hardly ever goes off. But if it does, it's Billy Joel singing Piano Man, right? I mean, that's just kind of what I have. So, by the way, it's a message in Piano Man. There's messages we're always getting. And God is always communicating. He's always communicating to us. So sometimes we feel like God isn't communicating. Sometimes we feel like nothing's getting through. Sometimes we feel like Job in Job 23, where he says, I looked forward and he's not there. I look backward, but I cannot perceive him. I look to the side and he's working, I'm sure, at the left hand, but I don't see it. And I can't see him on my right hand either. In other words, we know God's out there. We know that he's communicating. We're just not getting it. Have you ever felt like that? And that's the time where we always have to run back to listen to God. And Psalm 19 tells us how he communicates. And you see in your outline, the first thing is we listen to God. Why? Because he's speaking. He's speaking in general revelation. He's speaking in the world in which we live. He's speaking loudly to us. As a matter of fact, there are 3 points here I want to point your attention to. They're not in your outline, so you have to write them down. And there's a very little small place to write that down. But there are 3 things. God's witness in general revelation is unmistakable, it's unretiring, and it's understandable. Got it? It's unmistakable, it's unretiring, and it's understandable. Look at verse 1. First of all, it's unmistakable. The heavens declare what? They declare it. They shout it. The heavens shout the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork, that God did this, that something bigger than us made all of this. Now, I will grant you that the creation that we look at has been tainted by the fall. What you look at is not pre-fall world. We're post-fall world. But even in the post-fall world, there is beauty to behold, and there is beauty in creation. Now, there's also gnarly stuff in creation. I mean, some of you don't watch certain channels because you have like tigers eating emus. I mean, you don't want to watch that. It's a little tough out there. As a matter of fact, it's the survival of the fittest. And nature isn't always kind. People who worship Mother Nature, they worship a horrible mother in some ways. Hurricanes and typhoons and animals killing animals, and I mean, all that type of stuff. It's not as romantic as it sounds when people say that. But the creation itself, cries out, there's something greater. And I want you to keep your finger here and go ahead to Romans 1. Paul picks up this theme in Romans 1. Again, it's an unmistakable witness. You say, come on, I mean, people aren't going to get to a triune God who sent his son Jesus to die on a cross for sin by looking at a tree. No, they're not. Obviously, we're not going to get there. But we'll get to the point, something bigger than me made this, right? Something greater than I made everything that we see. And so Paul links and he kind of assumes it in Romans chapter 1. And so look at it with me in verse 18. The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress what? Well, what truth? They're suppressing truth. In other words, people, because they are sinners and the noetic effects of sin, that means the effect of sin on my mind, on my ability to analyze things well and analyze things correctly, there's an effect of sin on my mind. And by the way, it's pandemic and epidemic. Everyone has this issue. That's why we're committed to the Word of God, which straightens our minds out, right? We need the renewing of our minds by God. And so it suppresses the truth, what? For what can be known about God is what? Plain to them. In other words, just an unabashed look at creation. Someone made this. Listen, people in the back outposts of the earth know someone bigger. Now, they might think it's a totem pole that was responsible or a pantheon of the gods in the Greeks or something like that. But they all understand something bigger than me is out there. Or as Thomas said, Aquinas, there's an uncaused cause. You can't go from nothing to something. It doesn't work like that. You cannot create matter. No one can create matter except God. And this is something that's intuitive. Look what he says. He says here, for what can be known about God is plain. And why? Because God has shown it to them. Where? In creation. In creation, yeah. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature. I mean, we see the power of God in creation have been clearly perceived ever since the what? There it is. Ever since creation. God created the heavens and earth. They declare his glory. They declare his power in Pauline theology here. And the things that have been made, so they are without what? Excuse. Why? Because although they knew God, see, there's a point in a person's life where they know there's a God out there. They don't know Elohim. They don't know Jehovah God, but they know there's a God out there. And so there's no honest atheist who would say, I've never believed in God. Somewhere along the line you did. Somewhere along the line you believed there was a God. And you've rebelled against him. By the way, most people rebel. They love darkness rather than light because their deeds are evil. They want to do their own thing. They don't want anyone ruling over them. Now, they can make it sound a lot more sophisticated than that. But ultimately, the Bible unmasks that attitude. Although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, this sounds like our culture, claiming to be wise, they become fools. Listen, the wisest people in our world are the people who can explain things without God. That's the cultural view. That's the Western worldview, not the cultural. That's the Western worldview. But the reality is they're fools. Why? Well, the psalmist unmasked that. The fool says in his heart, what? No God. Only the fool would look at creation and say, hey, this all just happened. What kind of foolish cosmology is that? That there was nothing and it came from, everything we see came from nothing. It doesn't work like that. No matter what you believe there was some protoplasm way back, and it kind of grew and exploded, and we have the Big Bang Theory or something like that. You still have to start with something. Someone created something. And again, that's Thomas's argument for the existence of God from cosmology. It's an unmistakable witness. And he goes on, he says, they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal men and birds. It's kind of like what one theologian said, that God created man in his image and man has returned the favor. God created us with dignity. By the way, if God didn't create and we just happened, we have no dignity. We have no dignity. Dignity because we're in the Imago Dei. We've been created in the image of God. That's why it says all men in our Constitution, all men have been what? Created what? They have been, what's before equal? Created. See, a solid world life view based on God created. God created and his glory is seen. And by the way, I'm not going to get into the rest of Romans 1, but it's not a pretty picture. And Romans 1 says, what happens when you do that? What happens when you sin against that unmistakable witness and say that there is no God? What happens then? What happens then is the imaginations of your heart take root. And you see what it goes on there. The unimaginable happens. And by the way, and by consistency, morality disappears. Why? By consistency. Because if there's no God, there's no reason for any morals. If there's no God, there's no reason for any morals. No ultimate reason. Okay, go back to Psalm 19. And so the heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork, that God has done this. I love this. And so it's an unmistakable witness. We have to move up. It's an unretiring witness. I like this. Day to day, what does creation do? It's always preaching, isn't it? Like if you go out tomorrow and you know what? Creation's still there, isn't it? If Neil, you've done some of the App Trail, right? And when you go out there, it's beautiful out there. You've got to come to the conclusion, someone did this, but you better go out this week because it's going to be gone tomorrow. No, it's going to be there next week. It's going to be there the week after. It's going to be there the week after, the week after. It's an unretiring witness. It just keeps on going and going and going and declaring and declaring and declaring from generation to generation, there is a God. And by the way, and he's a great God, isn't he? God's revealed himself in the beauty of creation, and creation cries out for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years, there is a God. And by the way, and it will keep on doing it. Why? Because God doesn't get away with the earth. He creates a new one, and the earth is there as an unretiring witness forever. That's stunning. Continually crying out. And you've been with me, haven't you, where times are rough and things are difficult and you're questioning things that maybe even the Bible says, and you kind of get alone and you get out and you look and you see what God's done and you realize this is big and I'm small. And God is great and I'm not. It's an unretiring witness. Third, it's an understandable witness. I like this. There is no speech, and it doesn't even use words. Can you understand things without words? Right? He's speaking by, again, what is it? His power and his creative glory is saying it all the time. Their words to the end of the world. In them he has set a tent for the sun, which comes out like a bridegroom leaving his chamber. In other words, in creation, we can see all these pictures of how God works. We can see pictures of God's creation. Talks about its rising from the ends of the heavens and its circuit to the end of them. There's nothing hidden from its seat. In other words, God provides everything we need in creation. He creates weather patterns. He creates things that are needed to go on. And it's understandable. What's understandable? It's understandable, again, there's something bigger than me that did all of this. Let me illustrate this way. Maybe you've heard of the teleological argument for the existence of God. How many of you have heard that? Okay. If you haven't heard that, how about this? An argument from design. If there was a design, there must be a what? Designer, right? You've never gone to someone and looked at the dress they were wearing and say, boy, isn't it amazing all the fabric just came together like that and you threw it on? Okay, maybe some outfit you've seen. You've thought that. But no, there's a designer, right? As a matter of fact, designers make a whole lot of money if they're good designers. Or in my mind, bad designers, because it's weird. Anyway, it's just weird stuff. But, and so there is a design out there. As a matter of fact, okay, I'm going to have to do it. We've got a couple minutes, so we've got to do it quick. Hebrews 2, or Hebrews 3. This just kind of, when I was studying this, just jumped at me. And you know it, but I was brought to my attention. And by the way, he's talking about how glorious Jesus is. Jesus in Hebrews, he's better than everything, right? Better. In fact, you want to learn about go to Dan's class. Better than the angels. He's better than the sacrifices. He's better than Moses. He's better than the law. He's better than everything. And he's arguing here that Jesus has more glory than Moses. And then he says, he kind of tucks this in, kind of like, hey, I'm going to give you a little nugget here. Verse 4. For every house is built by someone. But the builder of everything is what? God. Okay? So Katie and Anthony moved into a house they had built this week. Now, you're probably not going to drive by their house and say, isn't it amazing how that house just came together like that? How'd that happen? Well, what they did, they delivered like lumber, and they delivered some pipes, and they delivered some roofing and stuff like that. And they left it there, and what happened? We had a couple of hurricanes, and look what happened. Isn't it amazing what nature can do? Listen, we have a floor for you in the hospital, if that's you. I mean, that's weird, right? You'd never come to that conclusion. Why? Because every design is a designer. If you're a hiker, you go hiking, and you're walking down, and there's a little maybe lake there, and then it has little tributaries, a stream, and you walk by, and you notice that it's kind of blocked up, and it looks pretty organized, blocked up by trees and stumps and stuff like that. You make an assumption. Someone put that there. Now, you're probably going to make another guess. It probably was a beaver, right? But you wouldn't just make some wild guess. Oh, isn't it just amazing? These things just kind of happen. No, designs mean a designer. I mean, that's how life works. There is a design and design. If you were maybe, let's say the earth blew up, which, political whirlwind may happen anytime, but the world blows up and you're the only one left. Okay, I'll give you a Noah clause, you and your family. And so after everything's gone, you come out, and by the way, there are movies kind of built in this thing, and you walk out, and you're walking around, and all of a sudden you find in the rubbish a watch. You're going to make an assumption. Someone made this, aren't you? You're not going to see the intricacies of a watch and say, wow, isn't that amazing how that would happen? All these little tiny gears in there. It was a Rolex. All the tiny gears in there, all the stuff in there. When you open it up, those just kind of happened. Wow. I mean, this is like evolution to the nth degree. This is nuts. You're never going to come to that conclusion. You're going to say, someone did that. Someone designed that. Well, what the writer of Hebrews says is every house is built by someone, and the one who makes everything is God. The heavens declare what? The glory of God. Now, that's in a general sense, right? Well, how about in a specific sense? Well, in a specific sense, God reveals himself what we call special revelation. And the most special revelation that God ever gave to us is what? No, not the Bible. It's Jesus. It's Jesus. And to end this morning, we'll pick it up next week, I want you to turn to Hebrews chapter 1. And so I'm setting you up for Dan's class. So you're going to be curious and want to go to Dan's class after I give you all this stuff. But in Hebrews chapter 1, and maybe you remember this, long ago, Hebrews 1 verse 1, long ago, at many times in many ways, God spoke to our fathers. Now, he spoke by the general revelation we've seen, right? The creation declaring the glory of God. But he also spoke in the Old Testament how? By the prophets. But in these last days, he has spoken to us how? By his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom also he created the world. See, when it says, in the beginning, God created the world, it says, in the beginning, Jesus created the world. All things were created by him, Paul says in Colossians 1, and all things were created what? For him. Watch this. He has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom also he created the world. He is the radiance of the... Yeah, there it is. See, the heavens declare the glory of God, but Jesus is the glory of God. And the glory of God is overwhelming. It's light in a dark place. And by the way, Jesus came to bring light to a dark place. This world is a dark place, and he brought the light of the glory of God. And he also came to bring the light of the glory of God for you and for me, because I was blind and I couldn't see. I was dead. I had no spiritual pulse, but Jesus came to redeem me. He came to live for me the life I couldn't live, to die on the cross a death I should have died, to rise again to give me life that I don't deserve. That message is glorious. That's what we're celebrating today. We're celebrating the glorious message of the gospel, that God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, Jesus, that he would live, he would die, he would rise again, that you and I might have life. That's what we celebrate around the Lord's table.